Time for another video. Kicking back in the park. Been putting my new Amflow PL carbon through the paces, and it is the top performer. I'm so stoked on it. It's a fantastic bike. But yeah, I got the parameters dialed down on my app a little bit, so I get a really good workout. But it really helps when you get to big hills and things like that. But I want to do a little tiny video with regards to both politics and economics, and it goes like this. Anybody that's sort of semi watching the news can tell that there seems to be an agreement, MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, between the United States and Iran to do a 60-day ceasefire with a bunch of different bullet points on it. But it's pretty obvious that it is obvious. Israel says, hey, we're not part to this, we're not leaving Lebanon, and we're going to do this and that and everything to sabotage the deal. So here's what happens. There's not going to be a deal. And if there is, it's not going to be worth the ink or the paper or the ink that's on the paper. It's just going to be eviscerated because of Israel and their control over our politics. And people might say, well, hey, Donald Trump, he's waking up. He's starting to say, hey, Netanyahu, too bad, we're going to do it this way. And we didn't include you in the negotiations, and you kept asking for information and we denied it. So people are thinking that Trump's finally standing up for America. But I'm of the opinion that Trump is compromised by the Epstein scandal. He's trying to straddle the line. If not, Melania is, in my opinion. She gave that really bizarre speech a month and a half ago, or whatever it was, trying to get out in front of something that she knew was out there and thought was coming out imminently. And it had to do with Epstein, had to do probably with the high-priced hookers, the ones that, you could hire for months at a time, and you're a big sugar daddy and stuff like that. And I'm not sure, it's just my opinion. She could be have gotten into that network of the Epstein circle by something like that, because I know she was in a modeling agency for a guy that, was one of Epstein's buds, whatever, and that's how she met Trump, whatever. But what's my point? My point is that the Trump administration is still compromised, in my opinion. And if they're not, you get idiots like Mark Levin, who's a traitor to the United States. All he cares about is Israel first. And now he's preaching, hey, this agreement needs to go and get 2/3 vote in the House and the Senate, right? And why is he doing it? Because he knows AIPAC, American Israeli Political Affairs Committee, has total control over AIPAC, or over Congress. So, he's trying to stymie the deal. But, when it came to violating the War Powers Act and the Constitution to go to war, he was all for that. Yeah, Mark Levin. Yeah, just know what you're dealing with when you're watching, and hopefully you're not watching some asshole like that, or any of those, with frankly Jewish Zionist neocons. But back to where it was. The agreement's not going to hold if it's signed. Okay, there's J.D. Vance, vice president, said it was signed electronically. I don't know, but then it's supposed to be signed in a couple days in ink. But it doesn't matter. It's not going to hold if it even gets to that point of being signed. And we got a real problem over there. And but in the end run, it could benefit us, because America's waking up to wanting to cut off Israel and realizing they're a bunch of ingrates that want nothing more than parasitically leech our money and our arms. And they want regional hegemony in that area. And our bases have been decimated by Iran in the Gulf states. And we're not going to go back and spend the money to rebuild those bases, and they're not worth anything, as it was demonstrated, because we're not able to protect the Gulf states from Iran. So the good result would be that we pull out of the Middle East. That's the good one. And then if we can stop supporting Israel, let them fight their own wars with their own money, their own troops, their own everything, then that's a win. So I think that's where it's ultimately headed. But again, this could be months to even years in the process. But in the short term, you can look for it. There won't be an agreement, or if there is, it's just going to not be worth the paper it's written on, and it'll fall apart. And the escalation ladder will be climbed again by both Iran and, unfortunately, the United States, unless we just do what Joe Kent said, who's the ex-director of DNI or worked at DNI, and just leave. But I don't think we're going to just do that. Economically, everything has reached insane bubble peak. I lived through the 1970s, the fuel oil crisis of 73 and 79, and I also lived through the great financial crisis that was brought on by the real estate collapse in 2007, and also in 2000, which was the dot-com bubble. Anything with a dot-com, people were buying it up even if it wasn't making any money, and the whole thing just imploded in the stock markets. That we're in a similar situation right now on steroids. Why? Because back in 2000 dot-com bubble, Alan Greenspan, head of the Federal Reserve, he poured gasoline on the fire by lowering interest rates, and that's what spurred the real estate crisis, because the interest rates went to zero, I mean, really low. Okay, so everybody and their brother was buying real estate, and then that collapsed in 07, 08, and then Ben Bernanke, who became the head of the Federal Reserve, did the same damn thing, plus quantitative easing, which was basically what it is, inventing money out of thin air and putting it into the system and lowering rates. So what does that all amount to? It amounts to kicking the can down the road. That can has finally got to the end of the road, and that is now. So we're in the everything bubble, and it's going to collapse, okay? So you're talking real estate down 30 to 35% at least. In some markets more, in some markets maybe a little bit less. You're talking equities, I believe, will take at least a 50% haircut. And, you know, when you wonder why somebody that's best investor in the world, Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway, they've got more money than you can ever imagine. They're the largest holder of treasury bonds in the world, larger than any foreign country, because that's perceived as a safe place to park your money and get some return on it with interest. They're not in the stock market because they know it's reached the top. You know, Case-Shiller PE ratios, everything else, it's topped out. And it might be today, it might be a week, but I'll tell you right now, it ain't going to be more than a month, and it's going to collapse. And as it does, you're going to get a negative wealth effect, and that negative wealth effect is going to make people draw back from spending at restaurants, clothes, jewelry, travel, buying homes, panicking, wanting to sell their home, and the market's already over sloshing around with way too much inventory. So it's just going to spiral down. We're going to go through inflation first, because the Fed will throw crap at it, you know, money and everything else, but it's going to end up in a I think, a depression, you know, so worse than a recession. And, you know, it could have even worse implications with regards to our reserve currency status for the United States dollar. But I don't want to go into that right at the moment. I just want you to be forewarned, if you watch these videos, that you got two major things happening. One is Iran war will escalate. And number two, the economy is going to implode. And I'm sorry to be the harbinger of bad news, but there's just no other way an intelligent human being can, you know, with more than 2 brain cells can see it. Unfortunately, there's a lot of people that don't see it. So that's why I make this video. So anyways, have a good day. Take a look at the view. I did my rides on the trails, came back into town, got myself a little half-sweet latte kind of thing with ice, and now I'm just gonna kick back. Until the next video, adios.